Good morning, everybody. We're here for our third installment of our weekly live classes. I'm happy to see everyone this morning, and we're going to give it a couple seconds and we'll get started. Today's topic is landscaping in the shade, which is not something I really thought about until I really read up on the topic. So let's get right into it. I do that every time. So here we are, landscaping in the shade, Florida-friendly landscaping. And as many of you know, my name is Colby Pitts. I'm the Florida-friendly landscaping coordinator for Hernando County. So first thing we got to talk about is why the presence or absence of shade matters. Everyone likes the shade. It's hot out. You want to get cool, and shade is a really good way to do that. But when you're trying to garden, it might be an obstacle really to getting the results you want. Turf grasses really tend to be pretty difficult to grow in the shade. They need a lot of sun. They need a lot of resources in general. And they really need about 6 hours of sun, while some cultivar species can do with a little bit less. But vegetables and fruit, anything you really plan on eating, or even plants with large flowers or large non-edible fruit, really need a lot of resources, sunlight being one of them, in order to really produce a good product. So there's some characteristics to shade that might change how you approach it when you're trying to landscape. The first one's when. So, as we know, the sun comes overhead, it moves where the shade's at in your yard. So somewhere that might be shady when you leave the house in the morning to go to work or what have you, it might not be shady when you get home. And vice versa. So you really need to know what parts of your yard are shaded and what parts aren't at various times during the day. And that goes for the year as well. There's parts of your yard that are going to be blistering hot in the summer with direct sunlight, but then in the winter might have a little more shade, and that can actually be the other way around as well. And then knowing where, and that's kind of goes in from the first one. The places that have shade in your yard are typically going to be somewhat shaded during, like, all the time. Just it moves about daily. And how this is a really important one. The shade below your pine tree, it's kind of splotchy, or shade from really high canopy trees are going to be a little bit easier to grow in because some sunlight gets through. But shade behind a building that no sunlight's getting through is going to be really, really difficult to grow anything in. So knowing what type of shade you have is super beneficial, because some plants are really going to prefer to be in the sun a little bit less. Some plants like shade. That's a super interesting thing to think about, because some plants like it, some plants don't. We have some that they call them shade tolerant plants. They really want 4 or less hours, or be in some of that high canopy pine tree like shade that we see all the time, which is like a high shifting shade. As the wind blows, as the sun moves throughout the day, it'll change. So that's kind of the good shade, and then we have difficult shade. That's dense shade, dark shade, coming from the building, or very wet or dry. It being very wet or dry will sometimes add an extra variable to trying to grow plants that is harder to get over. It's like pick a struggle. We have it's either going to be really shady or really wet or really dry, and you don't want to have a combination of any of those factors when you can really just have one or two. Here's some examples of some plants that will grow in shade. Azalea is a big one. Those are beautiful. Kind of a big bushy. I'm sure everyone knows what an azalea is, but if you don't, it's a big kind of bushy, lots of really pretty pink, white pink, white, purple flowers. And they like really sandy soil, which, as some of you may know, is very abundant in Hernando County. And they also like that partial shade I'm talking about, where it's shaded for part of the day, or you have dappled shade throughout. The Kunti, which I love the Kunti, it doesn't need much sun at all. It really thrives in some not super bright areas, and they're really hardy. You can grow them when it's wet. They don't really need a lot of water. You really don't have to water them after they're established at all. Another plant that might be great in a shady area is Aztec grass. It's you don't have grass. It's a good option for when you can't grow turf grass in a super shady area. You can plant these in a mulch bed or a flower bed, and they'll do pretty well with some partial sun. And lastly, we have dwarf mondo grass. I know that a lot of people living in HOAs or deed restricted communities may not be allowed to grow anything other than St. Augustine or what have you, but mondo grass looks pretty good when you get it. If you get one of the dwarf varieties that you can plant as a ground cover, it likes the really filtered sun, or it can even grow in full shade. So this is a great option for backyard ground cover under a bunch of trees that you really are not going to get enough sun to support something like St. Augustine grass. So there's kind of some properties of plants that make them like shade a little more. Those being broadleaves. So you want to think of leaves like a solar panel almost. They are gathering that energy from the sun, and one of the ways they do that, the main way, the way that they do it is by getting as much sun as possible. So a big broadleaf is going to get more sun than something like a thin leaf like you'd see on a blade of grass. Native woodland plants that you would see growing in the lower levels of something like the forest, or in an area where they're adapted already to growing in a shady environment. Your house plants that would be used in areas that don't really get a whole lot of temperature fluctuation tend to do pretty well in shady areas. You got to think they're used to growing in partial shade because you can grow them in your house. So if you put it out in the backyard, let it go, a lot of times they'll do well. And ferns typically tend to be not super complex plants, and can do on a little bit less energy than something like let's say a guava tree that needs a whole lot of sun, a whole lot of resources in order to do very well. And here's kind of some options for you to things that you can do to make use of the shade that you're seeing. The first of which is pruning effectively. Pruning is really important, and I encourage you to check with the local extension office in order to, if you're unsure of how to prune your trees, because if you do it wrong, it may really negatively impact the health of your tree. But you can also, you find out your guidelines, find out what you can do, and if you prune in a way that lets some sun through, maybe instead of having a fully shaded area, you can have a partial shade area that more plants will be able to grow in. A big one is using containers. So a lot of these shady areas are under trees. Trees have very large, very resource-hungry roots that are growing. If you put your shade-tolerant plants in containers on the ground, it picks them up out of that competition with those tree roots. Typically, a lot of smaller plants are going to lose the competition with tree roots, and they won't ever grow in the way that you want them to. The other one I have is mowing high and reducing traffic. You want to make sure that your leaves on your ground plants are as healthy and large as possible. So mow it high. We already recommend that St. Augustine grass mowed to be 4 inches, but if it's in your backyard somewhere super shady, you might want to just let it get a little bit higher, because it basically makes those solar panels that I was talking about a lot bigger, allows them to get more, to absorb more energy from the sun, and making sure that blade integrity, the health of the leaves, the blades of grass or what have you, make sure that they are as healthy as possible, because if you're walking on them, you're damaging them, or driving over them or whatever, you're damaging that leaf and making it a little bit less efficient in uptaking that energy through or from the sun. So here's some other considerations that you might want to take into account when you're planning to garden in the shade. Areas under the trees tend to be warmer. This follows the same logic as putting sheets over your plants when it's cold. Fertilizer cannot compensate for less light. The fertilizers, it's filling a different hole completely. It's like the little kid's toy where you have round pegs, square holes. A lack of light is not going to be fixed by fertilizer. Giving it too much of one thing it's not going to fix not being enough sun. And there's all kinds of other issues that come when you over fertilize. So, and even then, if you're over fertilizing the plants, if it doesn't have enough of the other types of energy to even make use of that fertilizer to grow in the way that you would expect. This one's kind of more of an aesthetic point, but using plants that have really light colored flowers, it'll look like there's more going on there than what you would see if you have a bunch of just green plants, because it's dark and the light colors reflect light a little bit more. There you go. And if you're going into if you're going to planning and you're choosing your plants, don't be afraid to call the extension office. They are incredibly knowledgeable, and they'll be able to help you out doing choosing plants that will work. And if you have a plant specifically that you're curious about, just ask them. They'll tell you, hey, you need these conditions to grow it here, or they may just tell you, hey, it's probably not going to work. And if anyone has any questions, I'm going to open it up here for a few minutes. I'll give everybody a little while to ask anything burning. Yeah, Susan, it's really important. It's like I said, round pegs, square holes. You're not going to fix a problem by over compensating for something else. If there's anything else, I'll stay on here for a few minutes before I go to my spiel, my self promotion. Excuse me. All right. So, if you're interested in what I said today, I would hope you are if you sat through the whole video. Check us out at excuse me, on Instagram at Hernando FFL, Facebook at Hernando FFL, or at our link tree, which is linktree/Hernando FFL. We have a lot of events coming up. The big one, your rain barrels, that program is getting back started under me. Our first rain barrel workshop is on October 25th. Signups are still open. Please, if you're interested, go to the link in the bio of the Instagram or the Facebook. There'll be a link there that you'll go to and sign up. I'll see it, and I will get you going, signed up to get your rain barrel and your rebate. Also, thanks to everyone who came out and saw me last Saturday at the Safety and Fun Fest. I enjoyed talking to everybody, answering questions, meeting the people who watch my classes. It was super, super fun, and I hope to see everyone again next Friday at 10:30 for a topic to be decided. I hope everyone has a great weekend, and I'll see you next week.